The Things We All Carry is a podcast about first responders and their stories surrounding trauma on the job. The intention of this podcast is to raise awareness and share meaningful conversation around a subject often viewed as taboo or simply ignored. Be aware this content may be graphic and it is real. It may not be suitable for children or adults triggered by this subject matter. Welcome to episode 44 of The Things We All Carry, and welcome to the first show of the new year. This year I hope to continue to bring you shows worthy of both your time and your interest. I plan to branch out some from firefighters and reach into the world of police, nurses, dispatchers, military, just to name a few. I also plan to bring a variety of professional voices to help teach and enlighten us. The first episode of 2023 finds us in Florida speaking with Christopher. He's been a deputy sheriff in Central Florida for over 20 years. Christopher reached out to me via Instagram and voiced a desire to share his story. He shares his battle with childhood traumas, trauma from his 20-plus years as a deputy, and discusses the methods and routes he's used to facilitate a recovery. A huge thanks to Christopher for stepping up and being my first guest from the world of law enforcement, with zero experience in a fire world. His story helps prove that while we're all different, we are still very much alike. A quick reminder to please help us build a community which not only recognizes, but supports each other through the struggles and recovery. Reach out through Instagram at The Things We All Carry, or email mystory@thethingsweallcarry.com to offer support and share your story. Please remember to leave a review on iTunes and give a shout out to any first responder you know, love, or care about. Y'all enjoy the show. Hey Chris, how you doing? Welcome to the show.
Hi, I'm good. How about yourself?
Doing all right, man. Where are you at today?
I'm actually at the house today over here over in Longwood, Florida.
So Longwood is Central Florida, if I'm not mistaken. And
Yep.
from my time there, it's a little close to
Yep.
where I grew up. And I know that you found me through some mutual friends in Florida, and you reached out to me, told me you had a story to tell, and so we talked the other day, and decided to go ahead and record a show.
Yeah, absolutely.
So tell me a little bit about yourself. Where you grow up?
Like I said, actually, I grew up in the same area I'm living in now, Longwood. This is actually, I'm living in my own childhood home. I grew up here that most of my life in Central Florida until I was 17. I started the enlistment process at Army National Guard. I went to Benning for a little bit, came back to Florida, and I've been here for most of my life.
And so this episode is going to be a little different for me because you're truly the first one that's not fire related at all. So you're in the sheriff's department there in Seminole County, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Making sure I got the county. I know we talked about it. And you've got no fire experience. And so this is you are the first guest, other than some of the specialty shows I've done. You're the first guest who's not fire department related. And you're going to share some of your traumas from the job as a sheriff, as a deputy.
Yes.
And so this will be new for me and new for my audience. And I appreciate you coming on.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's important we're all first responders, we all have similar traumas and experience. So there's some things that make them, each one distinctive and individual as well.
I think that for law enforcement versus first responder, there's definitely a different set of stressors that you go into the job accepting.
Yep.
We both accept that there's danger in both our jobs. The danger is just different for each of us in our jobs.
Right.
And I think we're going to get into some of that, some of what you've been taught and how you've been taught to interact with people outside or around you as a law enforcement, as part of law enforcement.
Right.
All right. So you grew up in Longwood. You're living in a childhood home right now. So you can't be closer to home.
No.
And 17 years. And where did you go? You said military after 17 years, correct?
Yeah. I decided to enlist. I actually this is why I'll go ahead and just kick it up. I at this point, I had dropped out of school and decided I was going to go in the military, went and got my GED. I had been at that point fired off. I had my uncles, a couple uncles were Marines. I had a few that were Army, and I decided, I want to be a Marine. So I went to the Marine Corps recruiter, talked to them. And they're like, oh, no, can't take you with a GED. We can take you with, you can get 15 college credit hours. So I immediately started trying to get into some college classes, taking some college classes. Coming up closer to I was still 17, turning almost 18. The Army National Guard recruiter I spoke to said, hey man, we'll take your GED, no problem. So I enlisted in there, went up to Benning, trained out, or I want to say I went up there late September, early October, and I finished all training by mid-March because I also was a mortarman. I went into infantry, and then I went to the additional training. Past that, we went into mortar training, and then got done with that. Came back home. Obviously, went through the whole recruitment process. Initially getting picked up. I had actually met my first wife prior to going up to Fort Benning and being in the military. And funny thing, like we discussed, is that the recruiter did me wrong. He says, "Hey, she's pregnant. We're expecting our first baby. Just go ahead and get married, and then you'll get your housing allowance. You'll get this. You'll get all this extra money." Yeah, I went and got married. My first wife, based on my recruiter's indications that would be beneficial for my financial status up there in the military.
So just a heads up to the young people listening, that is not the way you're supposed to do
No,
it. Not at all.
yeah, I did that, and then I got back, and we were still together, and I decided that I was going to go down the law enforcement route. Back in late 1998, I applied because back in the late 90s and early 2000s, it was pretty difficult to get a job in law enforcement. It wasn't like it is now where they sponsor everybody for every kind of class. So pretty much somebody had to retire or quit or get fired before you could get hired on as a deputy sheriff. You had to put yourself in Florida. You have to put yourself through the police academy and then take the state exam. And then if you're lucky, if an agency picks you up, they'll hire you and then start your certification. There, with the exception of a few agencies, there's a couple agencies locally, the sister police department of Orlando and Orange County. Back then they would sponsor deputy sheriffs, but it was impossible to get sponsorship from them without a lot of extras, such as a bachelor's or a minimal bachelor's degree and some other things. I decided I was going to go ahead and pick up a job as a youth specialist, and it was a youth specialist / code drill instructor. It was we did a weekend boot camps with the kids, and then during the weekday we worked with the kids that were on probation. So I got that job back in late 1998. Did that for about a year. In about the late 1990ish, I want to say the jail was hurting for correctional deputies, and so they offered at this point to. Let me back up just a second. So the reason I couldn't get into the police academy was because my wife was working part-time as a waitress in the Tijuana Flats. I was the only one that was bringing the money in. And so I couldn't afford to put myself in the academy. And back then, like we discussed before, vocational GI bills didn't cover vocational. So I couldn't get the military to cover for a police academy. It had to be college type style classes, running towards a degree. By that point, when they heard there was a sponsorship that they were going to put somebody through the academy to go through for correctional deputy, I decided to go ahead and take that opportunity and become a correctional officer. I did that. It was easy because when that part was easy because when I went into it, they actually paid for my academy. They paid for me to be there. I still had all my benefits, my health insurance, all that. Completed that, got my certification. They paid for my state exam. And
back up a second, because
yeah,
I think you said yes, they paid for it and you kept everything because you were working the other job as well. So I think we talked about how brutal that schedule was for you, though.
It got worse when I went to do the crossover.
Okay.
Yeah, the crossover is really where it got brutal.
Okay, so I misspoke then. So
yeah.
I will edit that part out.
Yeah, no, it was a full transition over to corrections.
Okay.
And actually what happened is during downtime through the academy, if they had weekend off or your hours weren't met, because we worked 86 hour 2 weeks. So, and it doesn't count for overtime till it hits over 86. So if your hours were low, you had to go into the jail and work for a little bit, and they would try to knock out some of your, what we call field training. And so got through that, got my state certification, got fully set up, went through my training process, got assigned to booking and intake as a correctional deputy in there. And then I decided, hey, I still want to go to the road. And by this point, making a little bit more money. It wasn't a lot. I think then it was like $21,000 a year. It was ridiculously a low amount, but it was a lot more than the 17 or 18 I was making while I was a civilian. I then hunkered down. I started taking the crossover program. And that's where things got really tight for 4 months. I literally worked a 12-hour. I worked on what we call our Bravo shift, which was the night shift. It was 5:30 at night till 5:30 at night till 6 o'clock in the morning. So it was like 12 and 15 hours or something like that. It was from 5:30 at night till 6 in the morning when they get the final head count. When they got the final head count, then our community colleges was only like a couple blocks over from the jail. I would drive literally over to the jail, park in the parking lot, and sleep in my car for about an hour or so till the class would start at 8, go in, take my class, go through the day of that. I would get out around 3:30, 4 o'clock. Then I would usually drive back over to the jail, take a nap in my car again, and then go back to work at 5:30 and rinse and repeat. And we worked the various, like I said, we worked 2 days on, 2 days off, 3 days on here. And there were some days it wasn't consistently like that, but it was majority of the time like that. And so I spent a lot of time taking naps in cars and parking lots of the college and the jail before work or school for 4 months.
And so then after those 4 months, what is the result of those 4 months for you?
Then I had to go retake the state exam again, which I did. I went and retook our Florida State exam through the Florida Department of Law Enforcement. And then I would continue to work in the jails correctional. I applied for patrol. At that point, applied an internal transfer for road patrol. And I was not expecting to get it. I was told by everybody in the jail, it takes 5 years. It takes 5 years before you'll ever see it. I'd been in there for about a year and a half by this point. I got the call, got told I was going to get it. And so I did. They said, hey, March, we're going out. You'll be starting in March. And which was funny because like I explained to you the other day, we're going through because I was a part of the critical response team within the jail. And part of that we got through all the same certifications, you're less lethal and everything. One of the things is pepper spray. And they're like, oh, we're going to pepper spray you today. And I'm like, I think it was like January. It was either January or February. I'm like, the next month or so, I'm going on the road. They're going to do it again. They're like, no, if you do it now, you won't have to do it again. I'm like, okay. So then, of course, the guy that was the one that was deploying it on me was mad. He was upset with me because he wanted to go to the road. He didn't get selected, and I did. So he really put a lot of OC on me, and that stuff's miserable. So then I went, of course, fast forward into March, and I get up to training, and then they're like, "Oh yeah, guess what? We're going to do it." And I said, "Okay, cool. I'm out for this one." And they're like, "No, you got to do it again." Lieutenant says, "You got to do it again." I'm like, seriously. So I had to get pepper sprayed again. Needless to say, fast forward there, I got onto the road.
So when do you start on the road?
It was around March of 2001, I want to say. I think it was March 2001 is when I started as a road deputy sheriff.
And since then, everything has been centered on the road or some part of the sheriff's department for you.
Correct. Yeah, everything at that point was based in the road division,
So now
or based in law enforcement itself.
So now you're looking at
sheriff.
21 years as a deputy sheriff,
Correct.
which I mean, that's a long time.
Right. Yeah, it's definitely it definitely adds up after a while.
So I want to go back because you mentioned before the Army that you had started skipping class and school wasn't much of a thing for you, and you ended up getting your GED. And I know we talked about some of the reason we talked about the history that you had as a child,
Yes.
and maybe this because I think that probably is what led you to skipping school and fighting and that reaction. I don't know if
Yeah.
you agree with that or not, but
I agree.
I suspect that that's the reason why.
Yeah, I think it had a lot to do with a lot of my behavior early on in life. Basically it happened as early on in my childhood. Like I said, my parents, I never even told them about this. I was sexually abused by an older next door neighbor. It was probably, I want to say, memory serves me correct, I was probably maybe 6 or 7 at the oldest. And he actually had abused me. And I want to say he was like 15 at the time or 16. And he used video games because this is back when Nintendo was cool. Nintendo was the newest thing. He used video games to get us over and then use things to make us do things. And so there was about it was just about close to a year of that being done to us. Not consistently, but a lot, it happened multiple times. And at that point, I don't know, maybe I felt the world, everybody was if we're going to give you something, we want something. And then I didn't trust people. I started, trusting less. And there was a lot of tension and anxiety was building up in the home. And I don't know a good word for it, but I was not real receptive of the world in general because of what I had experienced. I think consciously and subconsciously from that experience. And so I started going down the road of hanging out with the wrong kids. I was always getting into fights, experimented with, marijuana. I was drinking and staying out late all night, running around the neighborhoods, doing a lot of stupid stuff. Just, yeah, at school. It was to the point where I would be in school and the teachers, I was that kid. Everybody knew that I was always in fights outside the cafeteria. And the teacher would, I'd get in the classroom and the teacher's, Chris, are you going to actually do any work today? And I'm like, nope. And he'll get the hell out of my class and go see the principal. And I just walk off campus.
At age 6, like you said, he was 15, this person was 15, you were around 6 years old. How do you extricate yourself from that? How does it end after just a year?
I want to say he moved.
So you just and this is gonna sound weird, but you just got lucky that he
I,
moved.
I did. Yeah, I got caught in it. I don't know why I didn't get out of it.
You're
Maybe,
6, first of all.
yeah, yeah. So man, I didn't totally probably understand it. Didn't see the whole of everything. And like I said, he was older. He was an older kid. I mean, in my head to this day, he was like an adult to me. I look back now, it's like he's a 15-year-old punk. But
Right.
back then, it was like he was an adult.
Of course it was, because you are looking up to him, and he was
Right.
someone you wanted maybe not to emulate, but as somebody you're looking for that approval.
Yeah. Yep. 100%. And yeah, I just got lucky. He moved, and I don't know. I don't know where he's at in this world today, and I don't even remember his last name. It's just like I got lucky. I got lucky. He was gone.
So you
I
don't
just
tell anybody. Do you I don't wanna spoil any story, any part of the story, but
yeah,
is
yeah,
there
yeah.
ever a time that you deal with that specifically?
Yeah, it'll come up later on
Okay.
when I got a position within the agency. I did just real quick. I kind of went through the law enforcement thing. I did the boot camps, the youth specialist. I went into the jail, got started the road, and then I was on the road for about a year and a half. Went back into the juvenile division as a detective position, where we assisted with juvenile probation officers, and we were responsible for supervising these kids, arresting if they needed to be arrested for violations, absconding from supervision. So we did a fugitive kind of thing. We were also responsible on our gang multi-agency gang task force. We worked with the feds and all the local police departments. And so I did that. And then one of the other things that one of the other reasons I liked y'all's show, and I also wanted to get back on it, is throughout my career, there was a lot of friends of mine in law enforcement that had committed suicide or worse during the process of committing the suicides. And about that time, before I had actually before it was right around a little bit before September 11th, I want to say I had a buddy of mine who was a Sanford police officer. He killed himself and was having marital issues, and I guess felt it was the way to go and killed himself. That one was a hard hit, but we moved forward. And then, of course, September 11th happened. Of course, we all remember watching the news that day when that happened. I remember
And you're still
December.
National Guard at this time.
Yep. Yep. I was still on the National Guard. And so, yeah, seeing that, I was like, oh, shit. Because Saddam was showing his ass throughout every day. Oh, there's stuff going on. There's stuff going on. And our intelligence people were like, yeah, just be ready, be ready. And then you see the World Trade Center is getting hit by airplanes and the Pentagon. All you could think about is, oh shit, it's happening.
Right.
It was just like in a constant loop of repeat, just all you saw. In fact, I do remember, because one of the guys I worked with was a captain over our National Guard unit, and he was in the intel side of it. And he actually came up to me. He says, Chris, he says, when are you getting out? Because I was getting close to ETS by that point.
For those of you not familiar, ETS is estimated termination date, something along those lines.
Yeah, end of termination, something
yes,
service.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
So in time service or something like that. Yeah. And so I was getting close to it, and I was actually going to be out shortly before everything had really started kicking off. They had already sending units over to Afghanistan for the Operation Enduring Freedom. And I told him, I said, yeah, I get out. I want to say, it was April. And I was at my ATS is April. And he says, he just shook his head and he says, don't hold on to that. So he walked away, and I'm like, well, I guess you can't talk about it. He said, no, I can't. So I just remember distinctly still doing my job, doing things, going to work, and then come back to, I remember it was Christmas Day of 2002. I had a good time. I was still with my current wife, my 2 kids. They went through Christmas, celebrated. And then I remember the next day I went to the grocery store, had some things I had to get. Coming up the stairs, because I was a courtesy officer in one of these apartment complexes. And back then we had pagers. My pager went off. And so I picked it up and I called it. And it was my squad sergeant. He says, hey, man, we're deploying. be at the armory tomorrow I think it was 0600 or something like that. And I was like, oh shit, it's happening.
Yeah.
Get there December 26, 2002, get up to the armory. I was part of the headquarters division because I was a mortarman. I ran one of the 81 mics. And so they were getting us ready. We went up to Fort Stewart, where we were piecemealed out through a lot of different units. And our entire companies were sent off with certain units. They piecemealed a lot of our unit. And headquarters unit actually didn't get, almost nobody got deployed from the headquarters unit except for a couple of guys from my platoon and then our entire scout division, because they were all obviously trained for long-term reconnaissance and operations of that nature. They got deployed. We were training off and on and getting ready. We went through the whole anthrax series and did all that. Issued out full desert gear, went through all the briefs and all that stuff. And after about 6 months, they were like, yeah, we're not sending the rest of you over. We're done. The push, we had watched through the push for Iraq. Once the push to Iraq had kicked in, I guess they realized they didn't need us anymore. So at this point, they kicked us back. And so then but I got hit with Operation Stop Loss. That's why he shook his head. That's why the captain earlier, I'm sorry, he shook his head when he asked me how I was getting out. Operation Stop Loss got me and cut me in over. We came back and I felt a lot of guilt for not going over with my buddies. I felt a lot of guilt of not being a part of that and beat myself up a little bit about it. But I was like, what can I do? It is what it is. But I had also found out during my deployment, I go back to this mental health of law enforcement. I had found out one of my buddies, who was also a deputy sheriff, had killed his wife and then killed himself over marital issues. So this was two people now I had known in my career that had ended their lives, and unfortunately this time killed their own family. Started to see a pattern, and things are starting to seem a little weird. So then I came back and I reported back to our juvenile division, back into doing what we call the intensive community supervision unit. And I did that for about another year or two. And then I decided I wanted to go back to the road as a road deputy sheriff to try to increase more skills and get more ability to promote. During that time, I started still feeling some stuff which I think came back from my childhood trauma, came back from my earlier traumas. Some other things started living a little more risky. I was drinking. By this point, I was having a lot of extramarital affairs on my current, or my ex-wife. I think a lot of times it was just that need to feel alive, that need to kill the numbness, to get that adrenaline, that excitement that started to go away.
And that makes sense because I think we've talked about it on the show with other firefighters and we've talked about that chaos.
Right.
Almost scared to live in the calm and looking for that chaos.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, and it's actually funny because my wife and my current wife today, she's actually a detective with us. She made the comment that she had overheard a thing, and it made sense that we as first responders oftentimes create chaos in our lives if we don't have it, because we thrive best in it.
Yeah, I've heard that a few times actually.
Yeah. Yeah.
Does that behavior go unchecked during this time, or does she know
Uh,
about it?
there was a couple times again I had left and she had knew about that. We got back together, went through this a few different times, but it was just, I don't know why she kept allowing me to come back, but she did. She kept allowing me to come back. And of course, during this period, I had now had another coworker who, he had just retired, but he was still, a friend and a coworker. And he had killed himself in a local state park and had left it for our department to find him deceased. And now I'm running up, three coworkers that I've known that have done one of the most extreme acts to themselves that one can imagine. So I think between that, my childhood traumas, things just start building up, and you're exposed to a lot when you're working out here. You're seeing a lot of things. You're seeing bad. You're constantly engaging negativity because we're not going to people's houses because they're happy. We're not going to these calls. We're not dealing with people when they're in their best of times. We're dealing with people in their worst of times. And you don't get to see a lot of the positive sides of life. So you just start seeing consistent negative behaviors, consistent negative actions, consistent negative. And it starts really just piling up on you after a while. This is when I want to say around 2013, 2014, I was just still having a lot of issues. Decided at this point I was done. It was fair to her, fair to me. We'd been together, I think, almost 19 years at this point, or 17 years. I don't remember. We've been together for a long time. And I decided to pull the plug, and I decided I was going to get the divorce. So I filed for the divorce. Even though you're filing for a divorce, it seems like it's just as stressful as the person who's just had a dump on. By this point, we had 4 kids together, and it was just kicking my butt every day at work. I was drinking. I was, still doing a lot of dumb stuff off duty, not so much on duty, but just off duty and doing dumb things and trying to keep that living feeling, that chaos out. And I know one time I had a sergeant that I was working for. I met up with him. Listen, man, this is what's going on. I actually started crack with him, and he just like, whoa, 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 hey, got yourself. We're not doing that here. We're not doing that here. Just get yourself in check. Get yourself in check. And then because still we're several years into the mid 2000s and showing feelings and having emotions, and we're supposed to be the tough people. We're not supposed to have that. So he didn't want to see it.
At that point, you were trying to talk to somebody, and he didn't think that was the time or the spot for what.
Yeah, he shut it down. He didn't. I just maybe it made him uncomfortable. I'm not sure. We never really readdressed it again. I just his question was, do you really want to get a divorce? And I'm like, yes. Well, then do it. And that was it. And then, like I said, when we talked previously, I'm on our peer support team, which is now, back then it was a critical incident stress management team. And we dealt with anytime officers or any employee was involved with a high traumatic situation, whether it be a line of duty death, any type of major traumatic situations, whether it be a call that was really bad or something that occurred in their presence, or, really bad scene that just they weren't handling right. We're the ones that they would call to come out. And we're off or on duty. Didn't matter. You went out, you went to that person, and you would try to help them get through the stress and start trying to find resources for them. I was one of those teams because this led up to all those previous suicides. I'm like, we've got to do something to stop the suicide. So when they offered this program, I got into the program. And so, of course, now I'm the one that needs help. I'm feeling like, man, I'm struggling with the divorce. I now just started seeing, I was also in the middle of seeing she was my zone partner at the time, and now my girlfriend, who's now my wife. I was just like, there's a lot going on in my life. The kids are stressed out. I'm stressed out. I felt at this point, I wasn't going anywhere in my career. I felt like I had hit a wall, and it was just like everything that could go wrong was going wrong. I just felt like the world was just kind of collapsing in. And, you went to work, you held together long enough to make it through the shift, and then you went home and you just did what you needed to do, whether it was drinking or just going out or whatever it is, just to trying to keep yourself together. So we did these monthly meetings of this critical incident stress management team, and we would sit down and they would discuss, hey, what are we doing for these cases? What are we doing for this? What are some more training we can do? Just basic run of the mill types of meetings. And I obviously didn't seem all there with it. I was just standoffish. I pushed my chair back in a corner, was just kicked back, arms crossed. And anytime anybody would say something, and I would give a negative response to it. And I'd irritated a couple people in the meeting, but I was like, I'm like, why is nobody else picking up on these? I'm presenting all the classic cues that we're supposed to detect and we're supposed to watch out for, and nobody's picked up on it. And so I leave the meeting, we're done. I get a call from the manager 2 hours, or maybe it was the next day. It might have been a few hours, maybe it was the next day. He says, hey, can you meet up with me? And I'm like, yeah, I'll meet up with you. And what did I do now? He would get together and we'll roll up in a parking lot out somewhere. And he says, hey, man, everybody just seemed like you didn't want to be there. And I'm like, okay, yeah. So maybe they did pick it up. I'm thinking maybe they did pick it up. And they just seem like you don't really want to do this. And I'm like, no, I do want to do this. And he's like, they were really put off with the way you were acting yesterday, and they don't think you want to do this anymore. And basically, if you don't want to do this, just leave. Just quit the team and go.
So the team that's supposed to observe that something's going on and step in and do some help, observe something's going on and then ask you to leave.
Pretty much. Yeah. Yeah. So I was like, it was a big kick in the teeth. And of course, my pride's still too high. Like, I'm not even going to say it. I'm just going to let it go. I told him, I said, no, I'll work on it. I won't do it again. I still want to be a part of the team. But it blew my mind. It was like, man, I'm presenting all the classic symptoms that we have been trained to look for, and nobody's picked it up. And without me throwing a flag up and going, I need help. it just wasn't coming across. And I don't know if maybe to this day, I still don't understand that. And we've got a good team, and my agency's taken strides to this day to really work towards mental health. And now, and it was more so back than it used to be, but I just couldn't figure out why that it wasn't picked up then.
What year
Yep.
was that?
I want to say that was right around the time of the divorce, so 2014, maybe 2015 ish.
And then the next big step for you career-wise is a huge one, correct?
Yep. Yep. So I then had been dating my zone partner. We had getting together, and so at this point, I wanted to get back to doing investigative work. I love investigations; was everything to me. It's what I wanted to do. So I decided I applied, and there was a couple different things I applied for, but had finally gotten selected for crimes against children, which is a unit that's they're we're investigating sexual crimes, child pornography, child deaths, homicides, abuse, things of that nature. Anything that would be the equivalent of an adult major crimes would be what we did as for anybody under the age of 18. I got selected in 2015 and actually started in the unit in 2016. Now, once again, I had never shared my childhood traumas with anybody. And probably looking back now, I probably should have thought about it a little harder before accepting the position once I had interviewed for it. I should have probably never interviewed for it. But I get into that unit, and it was a lot of exposures. And we're going through digital media, through crime line tips and reviewing images that are of children being abused or sexually molested, going on cases where family members and neighbors are abusing or neglect or molesting and sexually abusing these young children. I was struggling a little bit with that. Then that stress was getting a little bit, it was building up more. And then I had that case where we had a homicide where the father tried to kill his wife, and he did kill the wife, went back, got his kids, later on got into a shootout with the deputies, and then killed the kids, and then killed himself. Got to the scene. I get in that car. I see these two dead, little babies. They were, I want to say 3 years old. It was the younger, and it was 2 and 3 or 2 and 4. I can't remember. They were just little babies. And I could still tell you a lot about the scene. I can remember seeing the blood come into the door scenes. I can remember how he was positioned, how they were positioned. I could close my eyes and see it even to this day. And so we did our investigations, preliminary investigations, our interviews. We were going through the stuff, going through the motions. And then we had to get the medical examiner out of there. And that medical examiner got out there, and I'll give it to them. That lady did a phenomenal job with what she did out there. She took that baby out of that car, and she handled that child as if she was still alive. Talked, sweetie, we're going to do this to you now. We're going to put you here. But when I'm looking at her hold this little girl, and I had a little girl at the time, same age, same body build, and I just started seeing my girl. I'm looking at her and I'm going, holy fuck, that's my kid. I'm like, oh man, they had snap out of it. That's not your kid. And that really started beating me down. But then I got to go back to work. And we worked that scene 24 hours. We were nonstop. And then we kicked off for a couple hours rest. And we'd come back for more. And until this entire investigation was cleared out, and we had to be able to present what needed to be presented to the sheriff and the media and so on and so forth. So continuing down the path, continuing in the unit, I had one of the last cases I got was another child. It was two twin children, boys. One was a younger boy, and by this point, my wife and I were married, and I had a baby with her, and they were starved to death. And one of the boys was probably not much younger than mine. And one of the things we had to do when we were in that unit is any kind of death involving children, we were to attend the autopsy. So we had to sit in the autopsies and watch the autopsies occur. And I remember looking at that kid and on that autopsy table, and I was like, that's my kid. That's my boy. And it really was, I just couldn't get these images out of my head. I was trying to close my eyes and seeing these things. And it's just like, can't get it out. Once again, start going, maybe I'll drink, chill out, relax, just do what I can to try to calm down. And I'm like, I just can't get it out of my head. I didn't want to bring it on my wife. We talked a little bit, but I didn't want to burden her too much. But she knew it was the stress was getting to me. So we decided one day we were going to go out to one of the local springs, and we're going to just take the kids out, and we're going to have a good time and just relax and chill. I think it was a little warmer. I had brought some beers. We're having some beers. And was texting a coworker who I had thought I could trust to confide into, and which looking back now, and I think he probably did probably what was right. I wasn't real happy about it when he did back then, but I told him what was going on. I told him I'm struggling. I'm seeing these things. I can't get it out of my head. It's tough. I don't feel good about it. I was having issues with one of my fellow detectives. I wasn't getting along with him. So just venting to him through text messages. And this was like a Saturday. Sunday comes by, Monday rolls around. I get to work and I get a call from my lieutenant. Hey, meet me at the office. And our building is separate. We're a separate satellite station from where the main sheriff's office is. So I'm like, okay. So I'm like, what's going on? He's like, we need to talk. Just come to my office. We'll sit down and we'll talk about it. So that was probably one of the longest drives of my life. I get to his office, sit down. He says, hey, I talked to him. I'm like, oh shit, I know where this is going. And he said, obviously there's a lot going on. Things aren't working out for you with this. It's obviously creating issues. He was concerned. He said, he told me he was reluctant to tell me, but he said, based on all these things, and once again, we've got a lot of people in this agency that have harmed or killed themselves. And they were worried about my well-being. He says, hey, there's a time you got to call it. He says, I think you need to reevaluate your place in the unit at this point. And I said, I've always been one of those people. I'm not going to quit. I don't quit. I don't give up. When I was in the military, and I remember finishing up infantry basic, and the last thing we had to do was a 5-mile run in 45 minutes. And I've never been a really strong, fast runner. And I remember hitting that 5th mile coming across that line, and I was 4 minutes and 45 minutes and 35 seconds past what I had to be. And they're like, you're not going to graduate if you don't pass this Eagle Run. That was called Eagle Run. And I was like, I'm not going to fail. I'm not going to fail. So they gave me 2 more days to come back at it. And I came back at it. And I think I dang near killed myself, but I did it 38 minutes. So I'm one of those people. I'm like, if this is what I'm going to do, I'm going to succeed. I'm going to do it. I'm going to finish it all the way through. And so I looked at him. I said, I don't want to quit, Lieutenant. I want to finish what I started. And then, like I said, I had that case going. I had a few other cases that I was still working. I wanted to finish it. I wanted to bring these people to justice. I wanted to make the arrest. I wanted to get the warrants. And he's like, no, Chris, I'm telling you, you need to reevaluate. And I said, Lieutenant, I'm not going to do it. And I says, is this one of those things? If I'm going to tell you, you're going to tell me I don't have a choice either way. And he's, yeah, pretty much. So he said, you got till this date. Tell us where you want to go. We'll get you where you want to be. And also, we're going to refer you to our internal EAP program for counseling and some follow-up, because there have been some drinking and there have been the dimension of the just not feeling right in the head. I drive back, meet up with my unit sergeant. He was like, oh, we'll try to get you, see if we can keep you inside, put you in another investigative unit. And then eventually had to come back and say, yeah, we can't do it. They won't let us do it. And I'm like, man, I'm being punished. I'm being punished for not feeling right. And I vented probably more than I probably should have to somebody. And now I'm being put back on the road. But they worked with me. They put me in a position. They asked me what area I wanted to work and what shift. And at that point, I'm like, I love the night shift, but day shift is more conducive for family. I'm like, put me on day shift over here if I could get this. And they gave it to me. They really worked with me in that respect. But so, yeah, that's where that childhood trauma stuff kicked back up. So I followed up with the EAP. I wasn't really getting along with a lot of the therapists they had. I did eventually end up going to see a psychiatrist. They did give me start taking some medications which helped a little bit, but I still faced a lot of these things. It kind of curbs it a little bit, but it doesn't really get rid of it.
It takes the edge off.
Yeah. So it was something that I had to start working on. So that's when I started working on looking towards self-mastery. And
explain self-mastery to us. What your version is, at least.
Yeah, just being able to reflect in and learn to control your emotions, your anxieties through reflective thought, writing. I started taking, because our agency provides jujitsu training for free for employees, internal, physical, mental. I started kind of getting into meditation and just trying to find myself within and find a spiritual balance internally, basically trying to calm my own demons. And then finding, and it's a multi-pronged approach. It's not just doing meditation. It's not just exercise. It's a combination of everything. Controlling what you're putting in your body, controlling what you're doing, what you're exposing yourself to, understanding that you got to have times out. When you get off of work, it's time to get off of work.
That's massive right there.
Yeah. And that's a tough one. It's a very tough one.
And I've talked about this on the show with other people. It's the fact that we have to stop identifying as a cop or
Mhm.
stop identifying as a firefighter because you're a man who happens to work as a law enforcement officer.
Absolutely.
And that's
Absolutely.
it's the identification. You're a husband, you're a father, you're a brother, you're a son who happens
Yep.
to be a law enforcement officer.
Yes. Yes.
And that gives you that delineation to be able to for, for the visual to clock out at the end of the day and walk away from it.
Yep. Absolutely. And that's key. That's why I tell a lot of my new guys because it's the fortunate part of being a supervisor or sergeant right now is I can take these experiences I've gained in my career and I can now give it down to these guys. And I know what to look for. And if I start seeing these things that I was doing or I was demonstrating, I start seeing it and I recognize it immediately and I start trying to address it. They aren't always open about it, but I'm going to try. I'm going to give them all the resources I can and to really try to give them some of the opportunities in their career that I was never uh, afforded, given obviously the time where we were at in our careers.
You say that your organization offers jujitsu training for employees.
Correct.
What does that bring you?
I tried to explain this the other day to one of our analysts, because we were talking about PTSD and they were former military, and to me, there's the component of strength training, expending the energy, but there's also focus and learning to control yourself during what we call rolling or when you're sparring. You're looking at that moment of control of either getting them into a guard and controlling to gain your breath, learning to combat breathe, forcing yourself to get that oxygen, and then try to calm your mind to find the next step. And it's always looking for that next step. And for someone like me, there's always, I say I have a very chaotic brain. My brain is just constantly going. I can't shut it off. It's very hard to keep it, to find that silence. And when I'm doing the jujitsu or probably any kind of martial art, you're focused solely on that and you're 100% focused on it. It's not like you're trying to pick up a book and you're reading and you're starting to think about, well, this, and you're 100% focused on doing that one little task. And it almost helps you find that silence. And when I get done, it's like, it's a real big high. It's a real big high. Your body and mind just became one and you feel almost kind of centered.
Yeah, that calm is a rare thing for many of us.
Right.
That brain, getting your brain to shut down is a rare
Yes.
thing for a lot of us.
It's very difficult, man. Yeah. And the more people I talk to, the more I see, yeah, you're right. It's not uncommon. It's not uncommon at all. And then of course, recently, funny part is my wife is an avid dachshund lover. And I've always had German Shepherds all my life. And I'm 100% German Shepherd, big dogs. I don't want little dogs. And I broke down last year and got her a dachshund for right before Christmas. And she actually wanted to get it into her unit to be a comfort dog. And so I went through all the therapy and training and all that. We weren't able to make it because of insurance issues. The sheriff's office eventually said, no, we can't do it. But I actually find having him too is a huge help because it's like he picks up when there's tension and stress and he just comes right up to you and he just gets in your lap and he just rolls around petting you. He's just happy. Pure joy coming at you. No negativity. Yeah. And obviously I'm still working towards like more therapy, like maybe like we discussed EMDR, somebody that's more of in person. I'm not a fan of this virtual visits therapy, but if it works for people, that's great. Just it's not one of those things that works for me.
I read through the notes that we created the other day when we spoke, and I think that was 10 days ago, I think. And you added a bunch to the notes, and there's a lot of death in
Yes.
your experience on the job. There's a lot of suicide from your coworkers. There's a lot of murder, which
Yeah.
I guess to be expected with the type of job that you have. I don't want to focus too much on that because it goes without saying that you experienced that, and
Right.
that's gonna add traumas to you. I want to talk about the thought that you brought up in the notes about everyone was out to kill you
Yeah.
that you
Yeah.
experience.
Yeah, it was one of the things that was early on taught on to us, especially in the old school mindset, is everybody's is a potential bad guy. Everyone you deal with, they may try to kill you. You've got to be prepared. You've got to be mentally ready. You've got to stay on threat level red. You got to stay up there. And their mantra is always watch the hands will kill you. That was always the thing. Watch the hands will kill you. So everybody, you're always watching the hands. You're looking for bulges. You're watching what movements are they making? Are they doing tactical positioning? Are they setting up for a flight, or are they setting up for a fight? And you just never could turn that off. And it gets so bad that you couldn't, even off duty, you're always looking people. You're always, who is going to be the guy that's going to try to kill me? Who's going to be this person? Whether you're on duty or off duty, you sit in a restaurant, you sit with your back to a wall. You don't want to have your back to a window. You're always just, and it gets so bad that like now I don't even like going out on days off. That's one of my toughest things that I struggle with is getting out of the house. I can get out and go run. I can get out and go to work. I can get out and go do my training, but to get out and do things, go see a movie or go to a concert or even go to the grocery store, it creates this huge amount of anxiety and stress for me because I immediately go into, I'm constantly watching, I'm scanning, I'm looking, what is the next problem that's going to present itself to me, next threat.
How do you defeat that?
That
Or
one,
or can you?
that is one of the ones that I'm still battling with. I don't really know how to beat that because unfortunately it's what keeps you alive, but I also think it can kill you at the end.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say, 'cause if you drop that mantra and you're on the job and you let that slide, then you set yourself up for disaster.
Correct.
But you keep that mantra off the job and you also set yourself up for some sort of disaster.
Yeah, absolutely. And whether it be one of the things that's always discussed about it is law enforcement is within 3 to 5 years of retirement, most cops die, whether it be through heart attack or some type of health condition, or whether even suicide, but usually just a lot of deteriorating health, rapid deteriorating health. And I think it's because you can't drop that. You're constantly in a state of heightened vigilance. And it's not healthy. You're constant, the amount of hormones your body's probably dumping that are not healthy, whether it be adrenaline or whatever else is going on. It's just not healthy. And I think that has a lot to do with why a lot of cops, a lot of my buddies now we talk about, a lot of us that we're getting close to retirement is you've got to find a hobby. You've got to find something that's going to pull you out of that zone. But while at work, you just can't be out of that zone. So that's where that trying to go home and go off duty, or as we say, 10/7, I'm off duty, 10/7, done, and separate the two.
How does it affect your interaction with people on a day-to-day basis? Not just your interaction with your world, but the people specifically. Have you where's your I don't know, I guess for lack of a better, where's your trust level with people?
I'm very low, I'm very apprehensive, and there's a couple different reasons. One being is that cop mindset. What are you doing? What's your angle? Where are you coming at? And some of it comes from the sexual abuse and trauma I think I suffered as a kid. What is your angle? What is it you want from me? And I'm always sizing everybody up. I'm always looking for threats. Do you have something that could be a threat to me? Are you are you demonstrating behavior that I could perceive as a potential threat behavior? I'm always looking for the threats. I'm always looking for, what are you trying to do to take advantage of me? And what are you going to do that's going to be a threat to me?
How does I don't know where I was gonna go with that question. Trying to phrase that because I don't wanna ask the same question again. Um,
Right. Maybe I missed it.
oh, no, I think you answered it. I think my brain is still a little bit of a fog from being sick, so I apologize.
Sure.
The other part that I wanted to talk about was the suicides. It's obvious that there's a problem with both fire and police with suicides.
Yes.
One of the
Yes.
things that we do as a whole, as a fire service as a whole, is we don't like to talk about the suicides.
Mm-mm.
We
No.
pretend that some of them aren't suicides. We don't talk about the numbers. We don't talk about a solution. How is that treated in the law enforcement world? Is it out there? Are you guys talking about it?
It has recently started coming to the surface. They actually, this year, we just implemented back to an old system we used to do called block training. And one of the days in the class is discussing stress and mental health. And they bring in a nurse that comes in and talks about it. But we're talking in my entire life, because my father was a deputy sheriff with the sheriff's office since I was born. My entire life in law enforcement, that was always taboo. So we're now 40, maybe we started looking at this 40 when I was 41, 40, 40, 41 years into at least in my agency, it's becoming very seriously more addressed, and now they're looking to do more with it. And there's part of the problem is there's only so much they can do. And some people are taking advantage of it. They've offered a lot of programs. We have medical, we have a nurse that offers nutrition stuff programs. You've got the EAP for psychological. We offer jujitsu, and we have a physical therapist, but a trainer, somebody certified to train who's willing to sit down and give people workout routines to help keep ourselves physically strong and also work towards your mental health as well. But
And how's that received?
it's starting to become more received than it used to be. And I'm really surprised. Like I said, as a supervisor, one of my focuses is my guys, making sure my guys and gals, making sure that they're not slipping through the cracks. And surprisingly enough, a lot of them are a lot more forward even nowadays. A lot of them are actually coming to us and saying, "Hey, I've got this going on, and I've got this going on," and so then I'm like, let's talk. And then we start trying to get them into these areas and into these resources. And I had a guy that was really suffering a lot because we had a child death or drowning, pulled the kid out of pulled the kid out of the water, and we tried to resuscitate, couldn't resuscitate. And he was a brand new rookie, and it was almost a year to the date after it happened. He really started suffering some serious mental setbacks, traumas. And it was becoming very apparent. So we started gave him time off, got him to see a therapist, really did a lot of things that back in the day would never have been done though. We were focused on, dude, we're going to give you the time you need to try to heal. And we even allowed him to come back and do light duty, even though there was no physical injury. It was a mental injury in my mind, and same thing the lieutenant's mind is. We agreed that let's get him back because he needs to be at work. Some of the process, if you totally stop work, that can also create stress on an individual.
Oh yeah.
Let's give him some work. We'll bring him out. We'll put him in the office and let him do some things and give him some work here at the office. But let's give him a chance to, hey, I need to go home earlier. I need to do this. Let him get out of here. And I do heavy spot checks. I try to spot check my guys when we're in a traumatic situation. We even clear a scene. I'm like, hey, how are you? Are you doing okay? We had a suicide about a month back, and it was not a clean one, but it was something. And one of the deputies, it was their first time ever seeing one in over like almost 2 years as being a deputy. And I told him, I said, listen, how are you? Are you doing okay? Are you feeling anything about it? I'm not going through it because I'm like, listen, if you start feeling stuff, if it's bothering you, let us know. Don't let it build up. Don't compartmentalize. We're bad about that from the old days. We would compartmentalize the shit out of everything. Hey, what do you do with it? That box can only take so much shit until it eventually is going to overflow. And that's my goal, is to keep them overflow.
And so you get a good mixed response. You get some people that respond, some people that I have to assume that there's some people who are still hesitant to respond.
Yeah, there's still some that they're hesitant, but I'm starting to see more. And I don't know if it's a generational thing or if it is because we now have more out there and we're saying we're more open to it, but there's starting to be more that are open to it than not. I actually had a case where we had to Baker Act another law enforcement officer several months back. And I pulled his department aside because they had responded to the scene after we got in contact with them. And I said, listen, what are you guys going to do to help him? And they're like, no, we are 100% behind him. We're going to give him support. We're going to do this. And then I had to go in there and explain this to this guy. I'm like, listen, this is not the end, man. We all suffer these things. You need to take advantage of this. Unfortunately, we're going to go to a facility, but take advantage of it. And I had learned that we had a facility that's geared towards law enforcement and firefighters up near SeaWorld. And I was like, well, I told my deputy, I'm like, we're going all the way. I don't care how far of a drive that is. We're taking them there.
What's the name of that place?
Can't remember the name. I have to try to remember the name.
Because I did an interview with a firefighter from Central Florida who brought up the subject of UCF's program, which is called Restores, and I didn't know if that was related to that at all.
I think that is related to it. Yeah, because I think it is an offshoot of UCF, and yeah, they're focused on first responders. Their primary goal. Because here was the other thing we ran into issues. If I come out and I say I need help, and I say those magic words, or I say the combination of some magic words that lands So we need to have to do a Baker Act, which is an involuntary admission. I'm going to take you and put you in a facility where you've probably taken numerous people and put them in and put you in with them when you're in mental crisis.
Yeah. No.
That's just not good. It's just not a good place.
No.
So it was really cool that we had this option to do that. Something that was geared towards, they only take first responders. They don't take outside individuals, and they have doctors and staff that are geared towards first responders and military.
Yeah. And that's the key. And that's another key is a lot of us say, I don't want to talk to somebody that doesn't understand.
Yeah, and it's huge. I've seen, like I said, a couple of different therapists, and you get in there and they don't understand what it's like to be in the position we're in unless they were a veteran or a retired law enforcement or firefighter. They don't understand the different stressors in life, lifestyles that we live and have to go through. Even if they probably have a decent idea on it, we don't see that they have a good decent.
Where are you today in general? How's life today?
Life is good. It's getting better. Like I said, the dog, the jujitsu, finding these different meditations, going through daily meditative routines. They're really starting to help me bring in to where I need to be. Still on medications, still looking, like I said, I still want to see a therapist more consistently, but things are getting better as I realize. And part of that healing process is me coming forward even right now and telling the story to you and to your listeners, because nobody's ever been told all this from me.
Yeah, that's what you said. You've never laid this out from A to Z.
Correct. This is a first time ever.
And people should know that we condensed this a lot because you had many stories you could have told, but
oh yeah,
many stories you could have told.
Over many years, there's just a lot. But this is beneficial for me too, because it's sharing my story and hoping that story will give others. Just listening to your podcast when I first found it, it was like, wow, man, that's me. Wow, that's it, and I'm not the only one. And there is an end. There is a solution. There is a healthy resolve to this versus an unhealthy resolve that a lot of us go down.
Yeah, and that's the goal here, is to make people aware of the healthy resolution as opposed to whatever the other options are. Let's put it that way.
Absolutely.
So I'm going to ask you my two questions now to wrap this up. First one being an everyday carry. And I know you, as a cop, you have a lot that you carry every day, but it doesn't have to be job related. It can be outside of work as well. So what's something you feel naked without, if you leave the home without it?
Unfortunately, it is very much job related. I do every day. I can't leave the home without it is my tattoos. Big on the tattoos. And I know you did a whole podcast on that with tattoos and telling life stories and even being able to talk to your artists. And that's almost a therapy process in itself.
Indeed.
Also, my weapon, my pocket knives, I carry those, my badge. Those are always with me. I feel very naked with it so bad that when I run, I have a smaller firearm I carry with me when I go running. But I try to minimalize all what I carry, but those are what I typically carry.
Okay. What about a book? You got a book you can suggest to the
I am an avid reader, and I could probably suggest 100 books because my wife is always mad because I have more books than I do space to store them oftentimes. But I actually am a huge fan of Jocko and Leaf Babbitt. And I think these two books should automatically be in one. Is the Extreme Ownership and the Dichotomy of Leadership. And I think those two, not only are they effective reads for people that are veterans in law enforcement and first responders, but they also, those same type of lessons can be taken into the home. And then I'm now finishing up another one called Discipline. And it's also by Jocko Willink, Discipline Equals Freedom Field Manual. That one goes a lot into mental endurance, discipline, and they even breaks down workout routines, feeding, what to eat, healthy living, and strength of will. So it's in two sections. One's all about the mind, and the other is all about the physical.
Awesome. I will link those in the show notes. I know that extreme ownership has been mentioned before, and though Discipline Equals Freedom, that has not been brought up. Not that I remember, but I could be wrong. Man, I appreciate this conversation.
Oh, thank you for having me
This
on.
was my first step into the law enforcement world, and you didn't disappoint.
Absolutely. I appreciate it. Like I said, it's my chance to put it out there. And like I said, hopefully it'll help somebody else. And I love this podcast, man. You're one of the few I listen to consistently. So,
I appreciate it. I do appreciate it. Just spread the word for me. That's all I
oh,
ask.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Cool. I will let you get on with the rest of your day, and like I said, this will be coming up pretty soon. I'll let you know and see where it goes from there.
Awesome, brother. I appreciate it.
All right, man. Take care.
Hey, you too. Take care.
All right, we're out. Thanks for listening to another episode of The Things We All Carry. Head over to the website, thethingsweallcarry.com, for show notes, resources, and to sign up for the newsletter. Until next week, take care of yourselves and remember to check in on each other.